Sir, I'm sorry, can you move one over just so your back here is not on camera? Yep. Great, thank you.
Yes. Whatever. I know.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
We are here today to discuss Black in America and Britain, immigrant narratives in the African diaspora. My name is Shonekan, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement here at Albany Theatre. Welcome to what promises to be a deeply insightful panel discussion. We're here today to dwell into the powerful themes explored in Matilda Feyiṣayọ Ibini's play, Sleepova, which centers on the lives of 4 British Black girls from diverse African diasporic backgrounds. Through the lens of Sleepova, we will examine the intricate layers of identity, belonging, and race, specifically focusing on the Black immigrant experience in both the United States and United Kingdom. We'll draw comparisons between the two nations, unpacking the unique challenges faced by African immigrants in the US and Black immigrants in the UK. Furthermore, we explore how these experiences intersect with those of being American or Britishers. Our goal is to foster a deeper understanding of the play's core themes and cultivate a greater appreciation for the richer diversity within the global Black experience. Leading this important conversation is our moderator, Suzan Jenkins. Suzan is a leader of the nonprofit arts and cultural sector. I think actually she needs no introduction, but I should serving as CEO of the Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County. She has held senior executive roles at prestigious organizations and is a Peabody award-winning producer. Suzan is deeply committed to anti-racist work and serves on the board of Maryland Citizens for the Arts. Welcome, Suzan. Joining Suzan are our esteemed panelists, Dean Stephanie Shonekan, Councilmember Jawando, Dr. Rianna Walcott, and Bola Audena. Dean Shonekan is a professor of ethnomusicology and Dean of the College of Arts and Humanities at University of Maryland. Her research explores the intersection of identity, history, culture, and music with publications on Afrobeat, hip-hop, soul music, and much more. She's also the writer-producer of the award-winning short film, Lioness of Lisabi. Welcome, Stephanie. Again, another person who doesn't need an introduction for all our Montgomery County folks. Councilmember Jawando is an attorney, activist, and community leader serving on the Montgomery County Council. Born to a Nigerian father and white cancer mother, Bill's biracial identity and upbringing have shaped his dedication to public service and his committing to creating opportunities for all. Welcome, Councilmember. Dr. Rianna Walcott is an assistant professor of communication at the University of Maryland and associate director of the Black Communication and Technology Lab. Her research focuses on Black British communication, practices across social media, exploring the evolution of a hybrid Black British identity within the Black diaspora. Welcome, Rianna. And Bola Audena, most of us here already know who she is. She serves on the board of Albany Theatre and so excited to have her here as a panelist. She is the CEO and managing partner at MBA Growth Partners, specializing in business strategy, growth, and transformation for women and minority-owned businesses. With over 20 years of experience in management counseling, Bola is dedicated to empowering businesses and fostering sustainable growth in the community. So to begin the important discussion, I welcome the panelists on stage and I hand over the proceedings to Suzan.
All right. Just leave me alone, as they say. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. I too am excited about this conversation. I saw the play on Thursday night, And I don't think that I'm exposing any secrets than just to say that it was a very interesting coming of age play. And I wanted to mention that because I think that we all, every single person on the stage has an immigration story. All of us have had lots of experience being an immigrant and feeling certain feelings about it. So when you think about that intersection of coming of age and that immigrant story, you know, I'm interested in understanding what belonging means in that context and how it showed up as you navigated being an immigrant here, and then maybe how it felt when you went back home too.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, thank you so much, Susan. This is a wonderful opportunity to sit on a panel with people who have similar journeys, but also very different. And I think that is what this show is about. It's about 4 different depictions of Blackness as they come through for teenage girls. You know, I always say that I didn't know I was Black until I came to this country. Having grown up in Nigeria, but my mother was from Trinidad, and she raised us as an expatriate in Nigeria. And so I have always really struggled with, not really struggled, but contended with the different definitions of Blackness that I was around. And it was only when I found music, I think that, and as an ethnomusicologist, I'm gonna lean into music. Music really helped me, and I think the arts generally helped me to ground myself and to understand the different histories of my 2 parents, one Nigerian, one Trinidadian. And that music has followed me and has followed my children who were born here, who are products of Nigerian and Trinidad, but also my husband is Yoruba, which is a Nigerian ethnicity as well. And so, but they're African American, or they feel very American. And so we have these really interesting conversations about what home means for myself, my husband, but for the children too. It's both a gift and sometimes a real challenge.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, did you have any of those kinds of experiences?
Sure, I told them before, I said, thank you for letting me crash the party. But I'm very comfortable because I'm the father of 3 daughters. And yes, so I'm used to this. And an amazing wife who's also, she's a Jamaican Bermudian, yeah, no, the concept of home, right?
Right.
So it's been a lifelong journey of trying to settle on the many definitions of that. You know, as was mentioned, my dad is Yoruba from Lagos, from Nigeria. One of the young women in the play is a Yoruba girl. And my mother-in-law, who lives with us, and my sister-in-law came to the play yesterday, or 2 days ago, this week, and they loved it. And the father of 3 daughters, I have a ton of sleepovers, so I can't wait to see it. But yeah, no, I think I often say that women are the culture givers. And in my life, you know, I've always been very immersed in my mother's side of the family because my parents divorced when I was 8. And so I've kind of been trying to catch up on my Nigerian side. And I think I've done very well. I've been a lot, my kids have gone, you know, I think it's a journey, but defining that, learning more, tracing the history back, you know, getting more, peeling back layer by layer, you know, cultures, because of trauma in the past, people can be reticent to give oral history as easily, I find, particularly when, you know, our experience. You mentioned you didn't know you were Black, but Black didn't exist until the 1600s, right? So, you know, until it was defined and put upon us. And so I think it's a lifelong journey. I have multiple definitions of home, and I think that's a good thing. And I want my kids to understand how they are connected to the diaspora. Last thing I'll say, I had an interesting conversation with my 14-year-old daughter just 2 days ago. And I was like, well, she was like, I'm only 25% Nigerian. So when I say I'm Nigerian, people are like, oh, you're not Nigerian, right? So this is the thing within and I'm sure all of us have a version of this. You're not that, you're not enough that, you're not enough that. And I said, well, your mother is Jamaican. I said, what do you think if you did a DNA test, she was like, no, they're Jamaican. I was like, yeah. I said, well, where do you think they came from? She was like, Pangea. I said, no. Yeah, and I'm like, how do you not know this? Like, you must not learn this. She's like, yeah, what do you know? And I said, no, then I pulled up the map of the transatlantic slave trade, showed her the routes, and I said, actually, more Black people from Africa enslaved came to the Caribbean and to Central and South America than to the US. And she was just like, eyes got all big, and I mean, it was just like amazing. So it's a constant journey to try to make sure we're defining home, redefining home, and exposing ourselves and our children, because a lot of our history, is intentionally and still intentionally kind of disrupted and erased.
Erased. Yeah, the interesting thing is that I didn't know I was white. I mean, I am also biracial. My mother's Italian. And, but I was just mentioning that we moved to Trinidad when I was little, from Buffalo, New York. And when I met some friends in the classroom, they said, oh, you're American, right? I said, oh yeah, I am. They're like, oh, and white too, huh? I was shocked. I had no idea. And so it was this speciousness of race that I thought about right then and there. It was like, oh, this is interesting. And then where do you belong? And how does that come to be? So, Bola, what was your experience belonging and the coming of age of it?
Yeah, I would say it's been quite the journey for me. I grew up partially in Nigeria, so it's funny when people ask me where I'm from. I would say I was born in Dallas, Texas, because my parents were there going to grad school. And then at the age of 2, when they were done, getting their degrees, we went back to Nigeria. So from 2 to 10, I was in Nigeria. And I experienced, even while being there, questioning, your identity as well, because my dad is my parents are both Yoruba, which is an ethnic group in Nigeria, but my mom is from Ekiti, which is a different ethnic group within the Yoruba race or ethnic. It's and my dad is from Ondo State, which is Akure. But even though they are probably about an hour away from each other, the people from Ekiti don't typically marry people from Akure, and it's a very distinct culture. And when you are Nigerian or Yoruba, you really just take on your dad's lineage. So technically, I'm Akure, but my mom always struggled with that because she felt like the Akure people never accepted her. So even though the mother does input, the culture and understanding into the children, because they're so hands-on, there was always that conflict between Akure people and Ekiti people that I came to know. So even from a very young age, even though I was in Nigeria, all Black people, I'm Yoruba, both of them Yoruba, there was still that conflict. And then of course, when I came to America at 10, then all of a sudden, that was when I got exposed to the, multiple layers of confusion of what it means to be Black in America, which I didn't really subscribe to. So it was very difficult for me to really relate to it. But then you spend enough time in America, and then the Nigerians start questioning, I don't know, are you Nigerian? So even though I can understand the language perfectly, my Yoruba may not be as fluent coming out, but people don't necessarily see me as Nigerian either. So you continue to kind of ride the middle. And then I marry a Haitian man, So I have children who are Haitian and Nigerian, and the confusion with them continued. So even in reading my daughter's essay for college, that was one of the things that she explored, just really this feeling of not being Nigerian enough or Haitian enough or African American enough. So there's always, I think we all have this sense of belonging that we're always questioning no matter who we are. And it seems like we're all the same, all Black people presents the same, perhaps all white people, but I think individually, there's always that question of, am I what is being reflected back upon, because I'm not truly as much of this as I see.
So yeah,
I guess,
to better understand what this looks like. I really want to understand.
well, as the resident Black Brit. So I am, yes, I've been here about 2.5 years now. I'm from London, so I'm really excited to see this. I think this is just my life writ large. And my grandparents moved to the UK in, kind of post-Windrush time. I've got one grandparent from Barbados and the other 3 from Jamaica. And saying, the whole matrilineal heritage thing, I'm only a quarter Asian really, but I still spent a lot more time in Barbados. But my name's Rianna, so it doesn't matter exactly. I overwrote it all. But it's interesting, it's funny because a lot of this conversation so far already has been about being the right type of Black for the place you're in. And in the UK, it's been really interesting coming here and having people read me, not read the type of Black person I am accurately. Does that make sense? So in the UK, I'm very normal. In fact, the fact that I'm 3/4 Jamaican would make me part of one of the first wave of en masse migrants to the UK, who very much their culture overwrote a lot of what Black British culture looks like now. And then subsequent waves of migration then added to it and changed everything from the music to the way we speak and so on. So now we've got something new forming. And I like to talk about the fact that Black British culture and the diaspora was about it online. It's very new. You can only really talk about a mass Black presence in the UK if really people mark it from 1948. Obviously there's some proof of presence stuff of this happening before then, but from what we're talking about now, when you think about Black folks in the UK, we can't really talk about it in a big way before then. So, that means that my parents' generation, the first generation to call themselves Black British, and my grandparents are still very much Caribbean. I go to my grandma's house. I've stepped back into Barbados. She keeps the temperature at that kind of level as well. The food is the same. That's where I am. It's very key. So, and then it's very, So when I was growing up as well, and I remember, this coming of age thing, a very formative moment was saying to my auntie that, I don't know, I was trying to grapple with what I was or something. And I did a lot of, my family's very mixed as well, so a lot of pointing at one cousin who's biracial and be like, why is she white? And Paris crying, I'm not white, I'm not. Deeply traumatic for her. And then also asking my auntie, explaining I'm a whole Jamaican and I'm a whole Asian and I'm a whole English as well. So I didn't like the idea of cutting myself up into bits. And then she went, okay, you're not English though. Don't ever forget that. You're British, you're Black British, you're not English. And that I think is a really kind of a key thing that's going to be really important here, because coming here, Black Americans feel very American, and rightly so. Fabric of the place is based on Black American labor and so on, right? But for us, that dislocation, that distance between Caribbean there and then West Africa for the majority of migrants to the UK and there means that a claim over Britishness is still a very fraught thing. So then getting here and everyone just reading me as English, that's it, that's where I am. More important than me being Black. I'm whoa, this is new.
The accent.
It's the accent, but I sound like a Black Brit, but people here don't know what that sounds like. So.
Absolutely. So we're at kind of a really interesting point in time all over the world. And you know, I think at its core, it's like who's in and who's out, who belongs, who doesn't belong. But if it's one world, I mean, at the end of the day, we're gonna have to figure it out, it seems. But in figuring out, there's always, you know, some little inflection point, some little moment that you're like, oh, I need to change this. I need to say something about this. Can you talk to me about a time, professionally or personally, when it became important to say something about that moment?
You want me to start? We're all looking at
Seems
this.
like you had a moment.
We all have so many moments. I wanted to say well, I'll say the moment, and I had to comment on something you said because just step with me. So I was walking on Wayne Avenue, and anyone from Silver Spring or kind of knows Silver Spring, you know Wayne Avenue, so downtown Silver Spring. I went to this Catholic high school, or a Catholic school, St. Michael's, which is right there on Wayne Avenue. The building's still there, but it's no longer school, across from the Whole Foods. I was walking to my mom's job, who worked in downtown Silver Spring, which is what I did every day. And this elderly white woman, who looked very much like my grandmother, my paternal grandmother from Kansas, who grew up on a farm, my backpack scraped her, and she said, "Watch where you're going, you little N-word." And it was like, I was like, what? Like, it was like 500 things happening at the same time. It was like, she looks like my grandmother. What does that mean? What did I do? You know, like, and I think it was the first, I was probably 11. It was probably the first time I realized, oh, like, I'm seen as something here that is not desirable, or that is a part of something too dangerous. You know, all the things that we know that have come to be associated with Blackness. Yeah, and I know I was Black, but it would just really struck me as like, it was clearly negative for her, you know, and it was you know, more than just a stereotype or something. It really hit me hard. And so I always think about, you know, we talk about the different types of Blackness, but how we also are, when we realize that we're Black, whatever we define that to be. But also then, you know, I have another moment, I'll say, when my mother used to drop me off at school, my parents divorced, I used to tell her to drop me off down the block. Now, all kids kind of do that. But one of my motives was like, I didn't want them to see my mother was white. Because I just look like a regular Black guy in America. Like, I'm just a light-skinned Black guy. Yeah, and that's how I was perceived. And so let's just ride that out. Let's add any layer to it. And yeah, and I was, and all people want to assimilate, right? You want to be welcomed. You want to be not different, right? Like, that's part of growing up too, until you come into your own. And so I think about that. And of course now, you know, I'll walk down the street with her, but it was a coping mechanism. And so then the last thing I'll say is the difference between being Black African, Black African American, and when you grew up in America in the 80s, you did not want to be African. Like, you did not want to be African. You wanted to be anything but African. And there's a whole history of that. And it's still around. It's not as bad, but it's still around. And so, you know, I find myself shunning both sides of my parents to assimilate to something that I really wasn't. Like, culturally, I had very little connection to the African American experience, other than that I was being socialized that way because that's who I went to school with and all that. And so I do consider myself African American. I think that'd be a fair characterization, in addition to being Nigerian American, in addition to being, you know, And so I think those two moments really are something that stick out for me, and just the experience of trying to navigate being proud of the various parts of who I am and just how hard that was, which I'm sure all of you have done. I'd be curious to hear about.
I know that you have some things that you wanted to respond to. Oh, sorry, thank you. I know you had some things you wanted to respond to, but I'm really curious to ask you if you would also think about the intersectionality of the things that he just discussed, because that was really incredible. And that idea of the many layers of things that people of color have to work through in order to get to the belonging part.
I mean, what I was thinking right off the bat was like, it made me think about how different my experience has been coming in just later, you know?
Right.
But also that thing about the status of your different Black identities in different spaces. Like growing up in the UK, there was certainly like early 2000s UK, it was definitely only or mainly cool to be Jamaican and not really cool to be from anywhere else. Or it was easier as shorthand to explain your Blackness as, with its proximity to Jamaica. So everyone had heard of Jamaica, but maybe not everyone had heard of Antigua.
Yeah.
Exactly, there you go. So that was, but also I've spoken about this with so many of my friends recently as well, the shifting, like Blackness being aligned with coolness globally, and then the shifting idea of what is cool and how much of that is like mapped around popular culture too. So with the rising interest in Afrobeats, for instance, now suddenly it's cool to be Nigerian, where it wasn't when we were little. People would pretend to be Jamaican when they were. And that's been like really interesting. And like, I also think that there's something about being the first or largest group in a place that means that you remain at the bottom, because those groups do most of the labor in making it easier for the successive migrants to actually come in. So, and then to establish yourself as different to, I know that I'm treated better than Black Americans the moment I start speaking, right? Like, I know that because like it's easier to go, British. That's it, not threatening, interesting. Beans on toast, blah, blah. But the thing is, back home, being Black Caribbean, I'm at the bottom of the ladder there, like we have the lowest education outcomes, the lowest number, the lowest third degree attainment, lowest wages, blah, blah, blah. And it's just funny how coming here that like actually, and then I've heard also that like Black Caribbean migrants to the US don't have that same, I don't know, it was just really weird getting here and having both of those things mean I wasn't at the bottom of the rung kind of thing. So that's like an identity thing that's been really interesting for me to navigate. Obviously, I'm now returning as a person with a PhD, which is very different. Like obviously, like I know I've got that class stuff in the way too, but it's still been really interesting in terms of like how they're valued globally and how those things shift. Because if you're a Black American, like they've traditionally had like an amazing relationship with Paris, like figuring out like traveling, just being not the Black person in the place you're from is enough to do okay.
Yeah. So this might be a curveball, but I think we can handle it. So I'm interested in hearing, considering your areas of expertise, I'm very curious to understand what your students are thinking about and how you're going about talking about your work in terms of belonging and how the music came up from community, especially the music that you study and the music that you teach.
So before I came to the University of Maryland, I was chair of Black Studies for a number of years at the University of Missouri. And so I, of course, realized that the conversations that we were having about Blackness in the middle of the country were very different from the conversations we have about Blackness on the East Coast and in a place like the DMV. We love being here now because, for obvious reasons, if you've never been to Missouri, this is lovely. the fact is that the University of Maryland is diverse. We have a wonderfully diverse student population, but it's interesting that many of the students are not necessarily African American. We have a lot of students who are like my kids, they are children, or like Bola's kids, children of parents who were not necessarily born here or raised here. I know that you were born here, but those few years. And so those children are in our classrooms. And so the conversation is a little bit different from the conversations I had in Missouri about Black music. But Black music is always Black music. Whether you're talking about Black music in Lagos or London or here in the United States, it has that beat that is universal. It really brings us all together. I did also want to, Suzan, if I may, just talk a little bit about the question that you asked earlier about a moment when we have realized that something is off. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I woke up this morning being very excited that I was coming to Only Theater. Why? Because yesterday I got a call from one of our faculty members, one of my colleagues, a young woman who works in our School of Music, and she's Black, and was going into the Kennedy Center for a rehearsal and was pulled aside.
Aye.
She was the only Black person in her group and the only one to be pulled aside, and she was told that she didn't look like she belonged.
Whoa.
And so yesterday, for a good few hours, I was dealing with that, dealing with how are we here right now, where this young woman, brilliant, so talented, has been into the Kennedy Center hundreds of times, and just a few days ago, the Kennedy Center has now changed. And so I thought about, so we're dealing with it, but coming here this afternoon, I'm reminded of all the shows that I've seen here, that the only theater I know will keep being the only theater. And that we have panels like this, where we can talk honestly about race, about identity, about social justice, freedom. The shows that I've seen here, I saw Fela, I was on a panel for that, thank you, Shruti. I saw Frozen, even with Frozen, you can also think about who we are as diverse people. I've seen several other things here, I don't recall that. Jason Reynolds' show, Long Way Down, amazing, incredible. But those are the types of things that happen in this space. And I just want to encourage you all. I know we've got some board members here. We've got some people who've been here many times. It's really important to keep this going because we are at a time, you asked us about this time, we're at a time when we need to figure out how to keep this kind of work going so that our students can think for themselves. We don't want to tell them how to think, we just want them to be able to sit down, watch Jason Reynolds play, and then come out with a thought about what it means to be young, Black from DC, right? So Only Theater, thank you.
Yeah. Before you go, I just have one more ask of you then. How does that all correlate for you? Just draw the string for me with belonging.
No person who comes here as an immigrant sat down in their country and said, I want to go there and I want to be there and I want to leave home. Every immigrant has a story, has sacrificed a lot to be in a place that promised certain things, right? And it's difficult. Every immigrant story has difficulty, and of course I could share mine, but there are things as small as seeing your kids, my kids are in their 20s now, but when they were young, going to watch them play soccer or basketball and being we didn't have like stacked aunties and uncles around us because we were the only ones in the stands, right? What does that mean? You know, what does it mean to have 3 children whose names are Nigerian, very Yoruba names, and being teased while they were growing up. But now they look back and they love that. So in terms of belonging, we want to cultivate a world, and arts and humanities, we think that we are the ones that are at the center of this. It's the arts and the humanities, the study of history and ethics and cultures and communication and languages, that we are the ones that can help people think about who they are in the world so that they can find their way to belong. I would like to help the Kennedy Center get back to a place where that young Black singer or artist can feel a sense of belonging, and we are feeling that that's shifting. So we have a lot of work to do.
Thank you. So Bola, here we are, and we've.
On the sofa in.
I told you that was my desire. And this magnificent theater has put on yet another very thought-provoking presentation. The story of coming of age of 4 young women, each of some immigrant descent, trying to figure it all out and then go to the uni, which I thought was so cute. How can we work inside our community here in Montgomery County to help our neighbors, our friends, people at the grocery store, people we don't know at all, people who we rarely interact with? How can we help our community better understand this conversation and lend a hand for better understanding during this incredibly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous time? You've been here, you've seen quite some things. Help us understand from your perspective what it is we might do.
So I think maybe what we don't understand, which is interesting because we're such a melting pot in this country, so you would think that we would understand it a lot more, but there's a real cost to not belonging, to not feeling like you belong. So when you mentioned that you didn't realize you were Black until you came here, and probably almost to the hour of you landing here, you're like, oh, yes, I'm Black, you know, like it's immediate. And that's because you were busy being free in Nigeria. What happens when you belong is that you have the freedom to be free. And when you're free, you can dream, you can create, you could be all types of Black. Only in America, when I got here, did I realize there's only one way to be Black. In Nigeria, you could be the full spectrum of humanity, right? You could be funny, you could be quirky, you could be all types of it. And you know, the acceptance was just, you know, given. You didn't question anybody for being anything because it was just understood. Oh, that's my funny uncle, that's my crazy auntie, and you just accept all of the colors of the rainbow. And then you actually would take a little from everyone and create your own board for the type of human being that you want to be. So there is a real cost to not belonging. Because when you're here, I remember when I first came here, in Nigeria, you could have your hair any types of way, right? It could be short, it could be long, you could braid it, without any question. And here, it wasn't even a real thing. And then you come here and you start seeing that, oh my God, it's so different. So in 6th grade, I literally would now start waking up 2 hours early to figure out what to do with my hair, just to make sure that it was acceptable by the time I got to school in the 6th grade. Something that you would never think about, when you're part of the, majority, culture or whatever. And that goes across the board. Not only what your hair looked like, but what you ate, what you took to school. Like, I would take all types of food to school when I was in Nigeria. You come here, Mom, you better not pack me anything that does not look like a sandwich. I'm not interested, even if, right? Because it's different and people are asking and it smells funny and it's weird. And you didn't want people to know what your background was, so I'm not wearing those outfits. I mean, that's just it's such a cost and it's such a burden. And we question, well, why is it such a thing? Because when you're not free to really exist and there's so much chaos running around inside of you just to really contain yourself so that you can be accepted, it's just exhausting, right? So I think, and just to tell one more story before, I go into what could we do. That hair thing is, like, it stays with us. It's not, oh, wow, that was cute, you did that in the 6th grade. It took me a long time, even while I was in corporate America doing amazing things, before I would wear my hair natural. And I had to talk myself, probably for a whole week, talk myself up when I was getting ready to really have my natural hair out for the first time. How would people receive me? What would they say? Would it be weird? Does it look unprofessional? Can I still? It's too much, right? So when I had children, I was intentional about making sure my hair was natural because I wanted their experience to not be the one that I had growing up, where we put chemicals in our hair, trying to fit in, right? It's crazy. But I remember my daughter was so proud of her afro when she was growing up, and she would want the biggest afro. And then she came home one day and she said, well, my teacher told me to let you know to style her hair differently because she's blocking the people behind her.
Oh, God.
She was in 1st grade. So it's 1st grade. So it takes a small comment like that for a child's perspective to change about the pride that they have in themselves and their hair. All of a sudden, for it to be a burden. And she came home and she didn't want those type of styles anymore. And the teacher may have thought it wasn't a thing, but it's a huge thing. Like, that would stay with you for your life, right? So I think curiosity is important. I think just being able to create enough space for all of us to exist is so important. Not just, if you're going to exist, it has to be this way for me to be comfortable. We just have to be curious about each other. We have to create space for each other. We have to honor each other. And at the end of the day, I think it's as simple as just seeing the humanity in each other.
I'm not even a big change or anything. It's always so interesting to me because, and I'm going to drag the UK again as ever, but it's funny because coming from, your experience is coming from a majority Black country to here versus like the UK is a lot whiter than here is, So when I first got here, I was like not even. I mean, I'm from London, which is the blackest part of the UK. 50% of the UK's Black people are in London, but I think there's 3 million of us across the UK total or something. So it's not really a huge number in that sense. We have a big, little but Talawa, big impact, small people. But then I got here, and I think one of the things that was so interesting to me is being able to see what was see aspirational things, right? So for instance, in the UK, in my 4-year cohort of PhD students UK-wide, 20,000 of them, say, across the 4 years, that are funded, UKRI research funded, so given government funded to study, because funding is less easy to come by for PhDs in the UK. Only out of that whole number, 200 of us were Black, and out of that number, 30 were of Caribbean descent. So we have a WhatsApp group, you know what I mean? So I know 30 Black, you know what I mean? From my cohort. So that's the kind of environment I was in, where I was always the first, and when I first got here, coming here, I had to learn how to talk about my own research, because for the last however many years, all anyone ever wanted to ask me about was what's it like being a Black person in the academy? What's it like being a Black person in this space kind of thing? And here that just didn't matter. I got to my department and they were just like, I've got multiple black deans. Like, that's just not a thing. it's not a thing for my boss's boss to be black. No, it's not. So I came here seeing that as like, noticing what a change that did for me, in that like I was suddenly able to talk about things I wasn't even able to get to before. I was so busy, you know, the Toni Morrison quote, like the real impact of racism is that we're wasting time having to constantly over-explain. And this isn't to say that there isn't, oh my God, is there room to go here? My God, but just like, it was so, I'm still trying to hold on to the fact that that was so good personally for me to have the flavor of racism be different.
That is such a good way to put it. It's the flavor of racism, or the level. You know, is it boiling hot? Is it simmering? Is it on a low boil? You know, what type? So Montgomery County was the first county in the United States to pass the Crown Act. If you're familiar, for those who don't know, it's the creating respect in an open world for natural hair. We passed it here. I authored the bill with Nancy Navarro, who was from the. Yes, that was yeah. So we passed it in 2019 or 2019. And you know, I mentioned being a father of 3 daughters. My third daughter, Ava, who's 11 now, but this was when she was younger in age. She came home one day, and this is a story that a lot of people have. She said, "Daddy, I want my hair to be pretty and straight like the girls on TV," right? And didn't say race, right? But that's what she was. It was in her mind that what she had was not pretty, and that straight was pretty, right? So I think I just need to underscore, for I know everyone on this stage knows, and probably many of you know, like the original sin of white supremacy, and of which necessitated the demonization and dehumanization of everything Black and everything associated with Black, including hair, lips, skin, size, go down the list. That is just, it's so powerful. I think we often gloss over it, but there's a racial equity exercise that I've seen done probably 20 times. You put you put 4 Post-its on the wall, the big ones, you know, that you can write on. And you put Black, white, Asian, Latino, because that's the predominant here. But you could, and then you give everyone a marker, and you say, go write everything you've heard about those people on the board. And doesn't mean you believe it, but what have you heard about Black people? What have you heard about white people? And without fail, the Black one is overflowing with things, mostly negative. You know, and I'm not going to repeat them, but everyone in this room knows what I'm talking about. The white one is usually a lot less, mostly positive. Latino, 3/4, mostly negative. Asian is kind of a mixed bag, some mild minority stuff. And the reason that thing is overflowing is because there's been hundreds of years of intentional work to justify the taking of human beings, denying their humanity, enforcing them into the slave labor. And then it was, as you're in music, it was reinforced by everything in the culture intentionally, right? It's so powerful that, and we are still under it, you know, that you can just easily be disconnected from my daughter, you, anyone thinking I'm not pretty in my natural state. Like, to think how ridiculous it is to tell a first grader that their hair growing as it grows naturally is disruptive. Just think about how deeply embedded those negative things, norms are. So it's just very traumatic, and we're still living with it in every day, and all the microaggressions. I don't know about, you know, I made the decision about what am I gonna wear today, right? It was hot, so I said, I wanna wear a kaftan, I wanna wear something cool and comfortable. But no, you did okay, right? But that's the point, we should be able to wear whatever we want. I come to council sessions sometimes like this. When I got sworn in 2018, I wore an agbada, which is a very traditional Nigerian thing at the Strathmore. I was nervous beyond my mind. Oh, I was nervous. Oh, wow, I was nervous. And I remember.
So proud.
Thank you. But I remember so for those of you who know, it's a very flowy West African dress. And I was the first person to be sworn into county office to ever wear anything but a suit. And so everyone else up there had a suit. You know, all my colleagues, everyone looked very buttoned up. And I remember a couple nights before, there's an African advisory group from Montgomery County. And again, I'm being half Nigerian, I've always struggled with, as we all do, what can I bring to the table? Am I allowed to represent in this way? And I had full-blown Nigerians saying, you absolutely cannot go onto that stage, you know, I'll substitute that white stage, and where, like, you need to fit in, right? And so the power of the white supremacy mindset, even in that, and then I had some of them come after, and I had Asian, Indian, Chinese. After I did it, I had so many people come up to me and say, just thank you for doing that. So now it won't be, you know, and then 4 years later, my colleague, Kristen Mink, who's Chinese American, wore traditional Chinese, and it was not a big deal. It was a huge deal when I did it, like all these interviews, and like it went on the WhatsApp, like universe, like a couple million times. I donated the Agbada to Montgomery history. It's like literally on display. So it was like a first thing. But so to answer Susan's question, like, what do? We step up, we be the full of who we are, and that can be multiple things. And then it's not as unusual, and then it's more accepted. And I think we have to continue to do that, but it's hard, but I think we have to do it.
And we're at time now.
No, you can open it up to questions.
Oh, okay. All right, so before we do, I just want a word of how can we support our allies? Because I'm looking at the audience and I can see that it's full of allies, people who care about where we're at. How can we support our allies? I can try.
How we can support our allies. So that story I told you about what happened yesterday, please keep the story to yourself. Because, anyway.
Things to work out.
The other musicians with this young woman did not step up. So how can I support them is to bring them into a room and explain what our expectations are when they see something. So it's really giving them and it's not reprimanding, it's not scolding, it's just, here's what happened, here's how she felt, what could you have done better? Here are some ideas of what you could do. And so it's just helping to train and continue to encourage and so, because we do need allies.
We need allies.
That's right.
And this is what I know. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. But I don't know what I don't know. And so if I am not willing to reach my hand out to someone who is obviously an ally and say, you know what you could have done right here? You know what I would have appreciated? To be able to do that, we are in this very strange moment. And maybe normally we'd be like, figure it out. I've been Black like forever and nobody fixed it for me. But that's not gonna get us anywhere together. And so I think making sure that we are able and that our allies are willing to understand that it takes more than, hey, she's cool, let her in. It takes more than that in that situation. It takes more like, hey, Will's okay, I know his mama's white, but he's cool. Somebody who really just steps up for him, because there were people who wouldn't step up for me either. I don't know what she is. Her mom speaks Italian, her grandparents speak Italian. Italian is my first language. Imagine how popular I was. Imagine, right? And so that stepping up and being willing, us on partnership.
I think for me, I think collectively as a community, we have to raise the consciousness of the community. I think, and that it is daunting for one individual to make any change, either, the disenfranchised group or the minority versus the mainstream. But I do think we all have a voice. We all know what beauty looks like. We all know what inspired, conversation, inspirational words, affirming words. We all know what good news is versus terrible news. We know things that, just speak life into our community versus what destroys it. So I think we can be more intentional about contributing to the collective discourse to raise the consciousness. And I think things like, display and the conversation is a part of doing that. But I think it just takes all of us, right? And to continue to really spread the good news. I used to think it was kind of corny, but it's so important. And so, because it's the overwhelming sentiment of what's out there that really defines the day.
Thank you. All right, so Shrew says, okay, you have a question.
Sure. Yeah, I was just gonna add, so what can people do? The reason I spent so much time on the white supremacy thing, I think, please remind people that exists. And it's not a guilt thing. It's just a thing. It's just what happened. And it has consequences. It's like if you're a logical person, like something was done for a long time, it has an impact. And so we have to work against it. It doesn't mean anyone's bad or, it just means that it exists. And when you hear these stories, which is why it's such an awesome space, it's like all the many decisions that were made about how to present, the idea that you can be, that's what I felt when I first went to Nigeria, you can just be. It's just that's why I'm such a proponent of sending as many people, if you think about, everyone's an immigrant here, even the Native Americans, someone came across the Pangea, the ice bridge at some point, right? But everyone came here from somewhere. But if you think about, every other immigrant story, and I went around this room, everyone had one. The difference is the assimilation happened. If you're white, you're assimilated into white, and that brought with it privileges. The other, Black immigrants in particular, and Black people have not had that luxury and still don't have that luxury. And we just need to, I think, especially now when when all the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion are happening, it's even more important to tell the history correctly, to, again, it's not about making anyone feel guilty. It's just, so how do we move forward from here? How do we all live in this beautiful, beautiful place where a third of our residents are immigrants? A third of our county are immigrants. 45%, if you take children of immigrants, are either first generation or second generation American. This is a beautiful place. We've got hundreds of languages. And if we are really a model here in Montgomery County specifically, in this region, of a place that can get it right, I think, where everyone brings their lived experience to the table, where they have something to offer, and that makes us stronger as a community. We're not there, but I think we've made a ton of progress, and I think we can continue to do so.
I think the only thing that I can add is thinking about who is uniquely voiceless or voiced in this moment, and just thinking about where, if we're thinking about allyship and we're thinking about safety and representation, who can speak and who cannot, because not everyone has the same voice.
Absolutely. Okay, any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think it's much more complex. And you didn't do much comparison of the UK and the United States. I mean, the UK never really had a big African or Indian, Pakistani population. They came and they were very educated. Windrush was the first mass immigration of people from the Caribbean, and they were treated like trash completely. That there was a big class element in the United Kingdom, and they actually accepted, people who were graduating from Oxford and Nigerian and stuff like that. And in the United States, I think that's a little different. And for sure, there's an incredible conflict, I would say, between African Americans who have been here forever and and intersectionality, African or other immigrants who are much more grateful that they're in the United States, and their immigrants actually work very much like each other, and it's not, and this, there are scary things, and I've been involved in this for 50 years, but there are scary things that looking at back in the day before the 5-letter word.
Excuse me, sir, but.
Okay, I'll shut up.
Yeah.
Did you
I'll
have
shut
a
up.
question for?
No, I was just
for
going
one
to
of the
say
panelists?
that it's very useful. I would be interested in really I would be interested in a more complex analysis, if I could just ask that question.
Yeah, sure, I got this. Yeah. So, absolutely right in terms of the history of Windrush and the mass migration beginnings of 1948. I've also recently been writing about the changing laws between both of those places that dictate the flows of movement. So from 1948, you've got the Immigration Act, where they are inviting Caribbean folks and folks from the colonies over to rebuild post-World War II. At the same time, just before that, you've got parallel acts in America that is restricting the flow of immigrants here and their citizenship. And then in the UK in 1965, I think it was, or somewhere between 1965 and 71, there's a moment where they say, okay, that's enough, black people, stop. And then they introduce patriality laws, which means that you can only, it's tied with your right to work, because mind you, at this point of migration, these people are coming from the colonies. These people are, my grandma always tells me I had a British passport when I came. She's a citizen. This is pre-independence for most of the Caribbean islands. So then you've got that flow curtailed, and a lot of those Caribbean folk who would have maybe gone to the UK then migrate to the US. And of course you have, as you rightly point out, these horrible conditions when you reach the UK of no dogs, no blacks, no Irish, being crammed into very small spaces. Lots of, I don't need to really get into it. It's very parallel to a lot of the sort of redlining experiences you see here, a lot of the conversations about race, a lot of the politics at that period of time. And what I think is so interesting about the difference in those contexts is that because US slavery happened on these lands, and then you've got the subsequent, civil rights movement, et cetera, you've got this whole, the context. I keep asking, when I talk to people here about some of the differences, I'm like, things like HBCUs couldn't exist in the UK. Things like, we're probably not going to have a black prime minister for another good couple hundred years, because we were at some point behind that. If you were to map them along, you can't really map those two countries together in that way. It's not like a productive comparison because of so many differences in the makeup. But I think one of the things that's interesting you pointed out, that the subsequent waves of migrants having to distinguish themselves from the the current black population in order to progress. You definitely see that here, not just with subsequent waves of black migrants here, but also just in terms of how the Irish became white, or how Italians were seen and how they became white, and that is to distinguish difference from the people who were at the bottom of the rung. So I think that there's a useful comparison that you can do between those two places. And one of the things I'm so interested in is contemporary diaspora wars. How do current black British people, which again, as I mentioned, 2 generations into calling us that, and how do black Americans define blackness globally? And what kinds of, how does the changing flows of migration globally even change what we think of as black? Because by 2050, a quarter of the world's population will be African, and will be under, under 30 as well. So we're going to have a very young global, so what will when we talk about blackness now, not just here, but everywhere, part of the way that people perform blackness and identify as black globally is by performing black American culture. Right. So that's one of the things that you have to do to enter the conversation. So what will that look like when the majority of the black population globally is African? How is that going to change our understanding of what global blackness is? Okay, sorry, that was a little pottage.
All right, well, I want to just thank you. It looks like it's time. We've gone over, but I want to thank you all for coming to the panel, especially I want to thank
Thank you.
Very, very much.
Thank you all. We have to get the stage ready for the show, so we have to, you're welcome to ask them more questions outside of the lobby. Sorry, we couldn't get all the questions, but I mean, this is a topic that you can't finish in an hour, so we don't, it's a lifetime conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, that was really good.